Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, although I have left the world of IT behind and now write about technology and record podcasts on the subject, I still have IT blood running through my veins and still wake up occasionally in a cold sweat thinking about the fallout of a P1 incident when a main switch has fallen over and comes back with a slightly different configuration than what it had before. Now, I recently came across the 2021 Network Field Report from a company by Auvik Networks, where they surveyed IT pros across North America and looked at how in-house IT admins are managing their networks and the current state of network management practices. And one particular stat that stood out to me was that more than half of IT professionals have incomplete knowledge about how their networks are configured. And yet, 77% of those same people also reported a very high confidence in their network. So it felt like there was somewhat of a mismatch between perception and reality, with IT pros unaware of the weaknesses in their network management practices. And that report, combined with the fact that Auvik is one of the fastest growing North American technology companies and winner of the Deloitte Technology Fast 50, Deloitte Fast 500, and recognised as the number one ranked Canadian company in the FT America's 500 growing companies list, it seemed like a no-brainer to get them on the podcast today. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Canada, where Steve from Auvik Network is going to share some of the insights from that report and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, my name is Steve Petryschuk. I'm here as the technology advocate at Auvik Networks. What does that mean I do? A little bit of everything. Work a lot with our current clients, with the IT community, to sort of help them understand and address network management challenges. Obviously a little bit slanted towards the Auvik side, but really, approaching how do we manage and monitor and grow our networks in this sort of changing times, especially with a lot of the uncertainty that we've had in the world over the past year or so. And
you're also an active contributor in a wide variety of IT forums and a frequent speaker at industry events. But let's not go there on tech events right now. I think it's something that we both miss. But I've got to ask, where did your love for technology come from, and what was it that put you on this path?
It was, I think, one of those things. A lot of us that get into tech start early on, right? We have things at home that we can maybe play around with. I grew up in a very tech-savvy household. We always had the latest technologies, the latest computers around. I was one of the first people that I knew to get the internet when it came out, and that's dating me a little bit, sort of suggesting my age. But I remember how excited I was that, hey, we were getting the internet, and I was the first one of my friends at the time to get it, and that was a big thing. So.
Yeah, I remember those days well. AOL discs, Netscape Navigator.
Yeah, exactly.
But here in 2021, Auvik's cloud-based network management software helps keep IT networks all over the world running optimally by automating and simplifying network management, and that is no easy feat. So can you set the scene and maybe expand on the kind of problems that you're solving for your customers right now?
Yeah, for sure. So what we really focus on doing is taking a lot of the manual tasks that are traditionally associated with managing and monitoring a network and try to automate as many of those as possible. So things like IT asset management, so discovery and documenting what's connected to your network, or automating configuration management, so configuration backups and those type things, as well as helping to accelerate the troubleshooting process. So if we start to think about a typical network issue, hey, my network's slow, the internet's slow, how many different things do we have to check to try to figure out the root cause of that issue? And so we'll help IT admins sort of get a head start on a lot of that network troubleshooting. And so that sort of those three buckets, that documentation, the network troubleshooting, network topology mapping, those type things.
And one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today was after coming across your recent network field report. But for anyone that has not seen that, can you just give me a bit of an overview of who you surveyed and the purpose of the report from the beginning?
Right. Yeah. So the network field report is something that we did late in 2020 for a release in early 2021. We went out and surveyed a number of IT professionals across the globe, primarily English-speaking areas, so UK and North America primarily. And what we were really looking to understand is how the network admins are spending their time, right? How often do they outsource tasks versus do things in-house? What are the top tasks that they spend their time doing? What tasks do they like doing? What tasks don't they like doing? To start to shine a little bit of light on the day in the life of a network admin for all those people that don't fill those shoes every day.
And one of the things that really stood out for me in the report was around network device configuration backups. And the figure, I believe, was only 30% of organisations back up their network device configurations daily or weekly, despite that additional data showing that configuration changes are incredibly frequent. And just talking about that there, I'm getting flashbacks from my IT past of what happens when you don't back them up. But can you tell me a little bit more about that and what type of organisations are mostly at risk here?
Yeah, so if we break that down a little bit, start off with one of the last things you said there was, hey, I've been there before, right? And I think we can all relate to that. We've all been in one of those situations where, the device failed and I need to, RMA the device, or I, made a change that I didn't intend to make. And I'm going to look for the most recent configuration backup and I don't have it. Or I think it might be somewhere, but it's not located in the right directory or the right folder where I thought it would be. And so we've all been in that sort of situation where we don't have that configuration backup that we think that we should have. I think network changes are becoming more and more frequent as the demands on the network are changing. If we look at how much change has occurred over the past year, that's primarily COVID related, but I don't think it's going to slow down over time. There's going to continue to be a number of changes to the network on a more frequent basis. We need to understand what is our acceptable level of risk around backing up these network device configs. I think best practice is every time that we make a configuration change, we should be updating our backups and making sure that's documented. But the reality is a lot of organizations have a fairly manual process for doing that configuration backup. Whether it's hey, I save that file to my local device, and as the network admin, I keep that on my desktop or laptop, not super scalable, or I might have a central repository that I update. But each one of those processes takes time, and often because we're human, we will forget to do that backup during that period of change. And so we'll then be left with whether it's a weekly or a monthly or a quarterly reminder that, oh yes, I need to make sure my backups are up to date. And so we've left this window of risk where we've made changes and haven't necessarily backed it up, despite our best intentions to do so. So we sort of have to sit back and ask ourselves, what is the acceptable window for an out-of-date backup? How often should I be backing it up? What is if we have an organizational policy around that, or are we just trying to hit industry best practices? But ultimately, we want to be doing it, I would say, as backing up as frequently as we're making changes with as minimal effort as possible, right?
Absolutely. And something else that stood out was that there seems to be an almost high network confidence with low network knowledge, because more than half of IT pros in the report said they've got incomplete knowledge about how their networks are configured. And yet 77% of those same people also report a high or very high confidence in their network. So can you expand on that potential mismatch between perception and reality?
So I think you hit the nail on the head there, where we have this group of IT admins who are very confident in the network but have incomplete knowledge about how it's sort of connected and configured. And so where that starts to show itself is when network issues arise. So we have this sort of confidence that because we are the ones managing the network, we are the ones in control of the change, that we always know what's happening on the network. But what the data shows is that we actually don't necessarily have that knowledge, and we only discover that we don't have that knowledge when issues start to happen. So we're left with this sort of false confidence because maybe we haven't had an issue recently, and so we're now more confident in the network. it doesn't mean that we've gotten any more knowledgeable about the network. It just means that we haven't had an issue where we've had our confidence challenged. So what this sort of brings to light is that we need to automate some of that network knowledge, right? I can't assume that every IT admin within the organization is always going to have complete network knowledge. I can't assume that I'm going to remember everything that I need to remember in the moment where I'm having that issue. So as much as we can, centralize and automate a lot of that network documentation, I don't need to now have all this knowledge in my head. I at least know where I can, go to get that knowledge.
And something else that I'm noticing more and more is that businesses need to move quicker than ever before. And of course, they turn to IT to bring that project to life. Well, traditionally, IT has had a bad reputation with lengthy and costly projects and how long it takes to get them up and running. And on the subject of project engagement, more than 52% of IT pros' time is spent on projects that they hate or just tolerate, and nearly half say that there's just not enough time, and that's a primary reason for not doing the projects that interest them. But can you expand on those findings and what you think it means for businesses ultimately?
Right. I think one important thing that starts to come up is we all want to be doing work that we enjoy, work that we are passionate about. We want to sort of leave our mark on the work that we do, whether it's sort of the day-to-day operational items, or whether it's the large network architecture changes. Ultimately, we want to have an impact with our work, and we want to enjoy the work that we're doing. So if we're finding that half the time we're spending is on projects that we hate or tolerate, then there's a bit of a mismatch there between a personal enjoyment of the job and the actual tasks that I'm doing. So I think there's some risk there that for a lot of businesses, they need to look at their IT team and say, are we using our team to the best of their ability? Are they providing, or are they doing work that is enjoyable to them? What does our retention rate look like? What is our employee satisfaction? And we will use here internally is the sort of employee net promoter score. So how happy are people in their job? And so if our IT teams aren't happy doing the work that they're doing on, or aren't feeling like the projects that they're working on are useful to the business, then you're going to start to see some attrition in people over time, which leaves some of the businesses at risk, right? Especially if that network knowledge, if there isn't any network documentation, goes with them, that's a big thing. I think it's interesting that that half say that they don't have enough time is the primary reason for not doing projects that interest them. Because there's a lot of functions within the IT space that we can automate, right? Our jobs as IT professionals is to enable the business. And that doesn't necessarily mean by doing a bunch of manual tasks, right? For a long time, we've been finding creative technology solutions to business problems. But if we're spending our own time doing projects that we don't like or hate or tolerate, as sort of the words in the survey, why aren't we looking to automate some of those tasks, right? Why don't we look to automate the tasks that we hate and tolerate, but that need to be done, so that we can spend more time on the projects that do interest us and ultimately do enable the business for success. So I think the sort of summary here is we're spending a lot of time on projects that we don't like. What we need to do is we need to automate those things that we don't like that need to get done, so we can spend more time on the projects that do interest us.
100% with you on that. And as someone that has had a long career in technology, and you put this report out there, I'm curious, was there anything in there that particularly surprised you?
I would say there's lots of little surprises, right? There's definitely some things in there that we've talked about already, like that mismatch between the confidence in the network and the knowledge. I think that's pretty surprising, mostly because how confident people were in their network. I thought, for the most part, we all feel like we know the network, but I don't know that we were all that confident. So that was a bit of a surprise. I also think that there's a couple of other things around there that surprised me, and that was the change in the typical work week for an IT professional. So if we look, we did the survey back in 2015 as well, and what we saw at that time is that there was a number of IT professionals that were reporting working 70 plus hours a week. And this time around, we saw a huge shift towards more of a normal 30 to 50 hour work week, with probably that 40 hours on average in there. And so that was a bit of a surprise that we as an industry have gotten better at working a normal work week. And I'm more or less attributing this to a shift in proactive management. So, reducing the reactive firefighting, because those are the things that you often get a call on the weekend or in the evening, and you have to be very reactive, sometimes spending hours working on something that could have been resolved with a proactive change. So I think that shift from reactive to proactive work has allowed us to shorten our work weeks, which was a surprise and sort of a net benefit for us overall.
And finally, what were the biggest takeaways from the report, and what kind of actionable advice would come out of that report that you could offer businesses, do you think?
Yeah, so we've touched on a lot of those points already, but if I was to sort of highlight the key ones here, first, it's, we're spending a lot of time on things that, as IT professionals, we don't enjoy doing. And for the most part, those are tasks that we can be looking to automate. So, I would reflect on a lot of the things that you spend the majority of your time doing that you don't enjoy doing today, and try to identify areas where you can automate some of those functions, whether it's via an existing in-house tool, whether it's looking out into the market for another tool that can solve that, or building your own tool in-house. But look to those tasks that you dread doing, or you don't look forward to doing on a Friday afternoon, and look to automate some of those to make your job more enjoyable and allow you to free up some time to do those higher value tasks. As well, I think we should look to that gap on network configuration changes, how often they occur and how often we're backing those up, and identify whether this sort of risks exist in your business. Are we making changes on a frequent basis, but not necessarily backing things up as frequently? And what can we do to shorten that window between a change being made and that backup being taken? I think the answer here again is a lot of automation in that space. There's always a bit of risk whenever there's a manual process in-house. So anywhere we can start to automate that function would definitely be something I would look into.
And for anyone listening that would like to look a little bit deeper into that report, if they want to download the report, look into the work that you're doing, or contact a member of your team, what's the best way of doing that?
For sure. So to grab the report, you can head to auvik.com/networkfield21. As well, there's a bunch of other resources on the Auvik website, including a link to contact our team, or you can link up with me on LinkedIn as well, which I believe we can include in show notes here.
Yeah, I'll add all those links to the show notes and the blog posts that will accompany this episode, just so people can find it nice and easily. But there's so much I've loved about our conversation today, especially love looking at how in-house IT admins can manage their networks, and also combine with the current state of the network management practices and ways in which they can improve. So much value in there, but more than anything, just a big thank you for spending a few minutes with me today.
Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
The fact that only 36% of organisations back up their network device configurations daily or weekly, despite all that data showing that configuration changes are frequent. Wow, that's pretty worrying, isn't it? Especially when you combine that stat with the fact that more than half of IT pros have incomplete knowledge about how their networks are configured, and yet 77% of those same people also report a high or very high confidence in their networks. So much food for thought in that report. But I want to hear about you and your organisation and how you're dealing with these challenges, and the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. So a big thank you to Steve for sharing his insights, but now over to you and yours. There is a seat here waiting for you, and a microphone too. All you need to do is email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, if you've got a question, a statement, or you want to come on the podcast, or just want to share something, whatever it is, send me that message now. As for me, I'll return again tomorrow with another guest, and I cordially invite you along for another interview. But more than anything, just a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.